Welcome back to another Muscle Minute here at musclementor.net. I'm Brad Hull and this is Justin Harris. And now we're going to give you some kind of last minute tips that I think maybe some first time competitors or people don't think of that going into a show, or kind of important things that can save you some time and some hassle.
Yeah, little things that no one ever thinks of, and which is why I recommend working with a coach or joining the membership section at Muscle Mentor. Your tan, you're never too dark. If it's your first show, you're never too dark. What you should do is go to the point where you think you're too dark and then add another coat. Right. And then when the person you're with says you're definitely too dark, you need to wash a couple coats off, then put on another coat. You can't be too dark. You should look like an imbecile in your hotel room. And you really should look. If you're doing if your boyfriend or girlfriend takes a picture of you with iPhone and the facial recognition works and they recognize you as a human, you're not dark enough. You really, that's the biggest thing, and you see so often the first-time competitors that they're not dark enough. And if you're at one of the shows where they have a spray tan booth and the tanner's doing you, and they tell you you're dark enough, they're lying. They're trying to save money. Right. They work as a business, and so they get a certain amount of money.
They're saving paint.
Yeah, every coat of paint they save is money. More money they make. They're not going to get you dark enough. Force them to make you darker. If you're doing your own tan, what I like to do, this is a basic for a typical pasty white person like me, do roughly 4 coats of Pro Tan. What I like to do is 2 coats, then take a shower. A 3rd coat, take a shower, then the 4th coat of Pro Tan, and that's usually you're nice and pretty dark. And then I like to do a final coat of Jan Tan at competition, and that color looks. And the perfect example of that, I think, is Mark Dugdale, the 2004 USA's. I specifically asked him, I was at that show, what his tanning procedure was, because I thought he had a great color.
Yeah, and that looks great.
Yeah, and that's what it was Jan Tan of one, not the Dream Tan Jan Tan, the Jan Tan at competition. It's a really dark color. That on top of Pro Tan looks really, really good. But you want to be too dark. And if you could, you can't be too dark. So if you're going to err on one side, or you're going to go too far one way or the other, you could put 10 coats of Pro Tan, and all that's going to happen is you might not look as shredded because there's that thickness of tan over your skin. But you can't be too dark. And that's so many first-time competitors get up there, and even if they look pretty decent, get placed lower. For 2 reasons, because they didn't practice posing for one, but also because their tan wasn't dark enough. The other thing is cramping. Very likely you're cramped. Some people get lucky and never have cramping issues, but if you do have cramping issues, there's some things you can have to do to fix that. Quinine is a product that's actually an anti-malaria drug that's prescription, and what it does is it decreases the excitability of the motor end plate, and so it kind of decreases. It doesn't necessarily decrease the severity of a cramp when it happens, but it decreases the number of cramps you have. And you think, well, that's a prescription drug. I can't get that backstage. What am I going to do? You can get it the day of the show. It's in tonic water. And almost all brands of tonic water have quinine sulfate. And so I recommend, you can get regular tonic water. I usually recommend diet tonic water just so you're not worried about extra carbohydrates one way or the other. Not that there's a ton in there, but get diet tonic water, and that quinine will help your cramping. And also, as a side effect, after the show, when you go out and get drunk, if you drink gin and tonic or vodka tonics, you can have less of a hangover for the same reason. But a couple other things you can do is magnesium. There's lots of electrolytes. The electrolyte imbalance is what causes the cramping. Well, everyone knows sodium, everyone knows potassium. If you've carved up on potatoes at all, or bananas or anything, you probably have plenty of potassium in the body. That's usually not an issue. You're probably low in sodium. Well, there's another... magnesium is another electrolyte that more or less mimics the effects of sodium, and so you can take 400 milligrams or even 800 milligrams of magnesium if you start cramping. Another one is, and I had this in our cramp vaccine, it's called D-alpha tocopherol, or vitamin E. I call it D-alpha tocopherol, so it sounded cooler. But vitamin E is another thing that has, I don't remember the exact pathway, but it's similar kind of to quinine, and it'll help decrease the severity of cramps when you have them. So those 3 things, vitamin E, tonic water, and magnesium, are good to have backstage if you start cramping.
Very cool. So I have a couple tips. One, this one's pretty exclusive to females, but it goes right along with
really small.
Or if you're in the same boat as me and just a very small male. So this goes along the lines of the tanning. So you got a great tan, everything's going great, and you go to sit down on the toilet, and of course you have to put down your towels or whatever to keep from staining the hotel's porcelain, which that's another thing. Yeah, bring your own sheets.
Yeah,
and
so you
bunch
don't
of
get
your
a
own towels.
$100 security deposit bill from the hotel.
Exactly. So you go to pee and you do, and then all of a sudden you notice that now you have a sweet pee run right down the back of your leg, and I don't know why, but that'll somehow burn a hole through tan like worse than a shower will. So what you make is what I call Professor Brad's amazing pee cup, and you just take a regular styrofoam cup, cut out the bottom of it, and utilize that to
Pee funnel.
Yeah, as a pee funnel. So, and that'll actually save you one or two or however many embarrassing trips back to the tanning section.
And even worse, if you
to
catch
get
that
touched
backstage, you're going to have some stranger up there in another region doing the touch-up work backstage.
Right. So something to avoid. The other thing is with posing trunks, especially on the guys, and I don't know if comes from just like wearing our jeans a bit lower than it has.
Modern style.
Yeah, it's just modern style. But the trunks, they don't look good if they're hanging, down even close to where your ass crack starts. They need to be up and pulled taut. One, so you don't look like you have a flat frog ass, because the lower they are and the droopier they are, the more it just makes you look
like makes your lower back look longer, and it makes you look less wide.
Right.
Because that you see a lot in lower weight class guys where they're only 5'6", but somehow they look 6'8" on stage, and it's because their upper body is so long because the back of their trunks are 3 inches lower than they could be. You really want to think if if you watch any old 1980s beach party movies, all the girls had their bikinis and it looked like the sides were practically up in their armpits. They were pulled up so high. That's really kind of the look you want. And as you get bigger and as you take more gear, you'll start getting the upper outer glute lumps and the thicker obliques, and it actually
above that.
Yeah, it creates a kind of a line. Ronnie Coleman used to have it perfect. I think the trunks used to disappear between his glutes and the upper outer. The glute ejection scars and the thick obliques, the trunks would kind of disappear in there.
Okay, so those are the two tips. One for the females and one for the males.
And then also be prepared backstage. The worst thing you can do is if you have a coach, especially go backstage and you send him pictures and he tells you, oh my God, you're flat. Eat some carbs, and you say, I don't have any carbs. Mm-hmm.
Glucose tabs are really easy to put in your bag.
Cake mix is cheap. I know that from having a diabetic daughter. Yeah. It's a cheap, quick way to get a bunch of sugar. But be prepared. It doesn't take much to get a bag of dried fruit, dried apricots, or if you're in the UK, dried apricots. Some dried fruit, dried bananas. Doesn't take much to bring some bananas. Bring a bag of junk food. Bring a Snickers and a peanut M&Ms in case for some reason you don't just want to be prepared. Bring some nuts and maybe bring 3 hard-boiled eggs. Who knows? Some of these shows end up now with all the classes. It used to be men and women bodybuilding. You knew the show started at 11. Men's middleweights were on stage at 11:45. It's not that way anymore. And sometimes they mix up the divisions, and you could be backstage for 3 hours and not. So you be prepared. Bring towel. Bring food. Bring all kinds of different food. Bring a protein source. Bring some junk food. Bring some dried carbs. Bring some sugary carbs. Bring your tonic water. Maybe even bring a pop. Maybe bring a Gatorade. You just want to be backstage. So if your coach tells you that they think there's some kind of last minute change that could help you, you want to have that. Also because, and I've done this as a coach, you forget that these people aren't 2 feet away from a refrigerator. So I'll tell them, okay, you look great. You're a little bit flat. Just go ahead and let's just have some fat and some carbs. Eat some peanut M&Ms. And they go, I don't have any peanut M&Ms. I think there might be a vending machine somewhere. And then they start stressing and panicking. And that's the worst case scenario.
So what about pumping up backstage?
Yeah. I'd rather always be prepared. Sometimes they go so quick and they don't tell. Sometimes they say, light heavyweights on in about half an hour. And you haven't noticed. Sometimes they say, light heavyweights on in about half an hour. Okay, light heavyweights, line up.
Yeah.
So always, I'd rather pump up twice than not pump up at all. And don't think the pump up is magical, but you do look better with the pump. And only pump up your upper body, pump up weak points. Don't pump up what you want to look big. If you think you look sweet with big biceps, that's not you're being judged on. If your chest is naturally small, I have a bird chest, and so I pump up my chest backstage. I'd love to pump up my shoulders and triceps because they look sweet but all that does is make my bird chest look even smaller. The other thing is if you did screw up and you spilled over, and like we talked about earlier with your blood sugar and stuff, if your blood sugar was over one time the morning of the show and you're down and out, one thing you can do to help fix that is over pump up, almost have an entire workout. What happens is when you do the pump up, when you exercise those muscles, that helps to bring the blood sugar down, and that starts pulling glucose from the bloodstream. And so what will end up happening is your blood sugar start coming down, and you reach that point where you start leaving redistributive hyponatremia, and you get your blood sugar low enough, you pass out of that redistributive hyponatremia stage, and your body starts creating the concentration gradient where water can start being pulled back from under the skin, back into the stomach and into the bloodstream. Well, then once it gets back in the bloodstream, then that water goes back up in the muscle to facilitate the pump. And I have a perfect example of that. I won the super heavyweights at the Junior USA's in 2006, and backstage I was really stressed out. It was my first big national level show, it was junior national level show, but where my first time as a super heavyweight, and I thought I looked good. I knew I had a chance to win the show, and I was peeled, striated glutes, shredded, and everything. But I was worried as a super heavyweight I wouldn't be big enough. It was dumb. I was 20 pounds into the super heavies. I was 245, but I remember being overly worried about that, and like an idiot, and going, which is why I need to work with someone because my brain goes crazy the last week. I was ready and peeled, but I was a little flat. So I overcarbed up and then was afraid I was too full, and I took a half a Diazide the night before the show, also like an idiot, which is why I need a supervisor with me. And I wasn't tracking blood sugar at the time, but this is part of the reason why I started doing that. And I get up the morning of the show and I look like shit. Everything was over. I ruined everything. And I started pumping up backstage. And as I pumped up, I started, shrink wrapping a little bit. And actually one of the expediters backstage really noticed and started really encouraging me. And I ended up doing almost an entire workout. I trained back, I trained chest, I trained shoulders, I trained arms, and I pumped up for about an hour. And what ended up happening, about 45 minutes into that, I finally broke through the redistributive hyponatremia stage, and I started pulling water back out from under the skin. And by the time I got on stage, I was, maybe not totally nailed it, but it was 100 times better than I could have been, and I ended up winning my class.
Yeah, that's awesome. One thing to add is with the pumping up, especially if you're trying to create that pull from the redistributive hyponatremia, is that a better way to supercompensate the muscle with glycogen is by using concentric only or concentric heavy movements. So as opposed to like I don't know anyone who's going to be doing negatives or whatever when they're pumping up, but you can really like by forcing a hard contraction on that concentric portion can create quite a difference, and it's something that I also do, and I forgot to mention in the other video, but during kind of the carb up times or whatever, that final week we'll do a little bit more concentric based work during those workouts.
Yeah. And one final tip is lay with your feet up when at all possible, and I'll explain why. You don't want watery legs, which you also don't want to pump up your legs because you don't want extra water. It's very difficult to get all the separation of your legs. You want your legs almost a little flat. But you need to lay with your legs up because there is no active transport system for the bloodstream back to the heart. Obviously, there is away from the heart. The heart pumps and squeezes blood and shoots blood throughout your body. But there's no motor or heart in your feet to get that blood back up to your heart. So the way it works is the veins work on a valvular system. And so there's little valves like this. And so you contract your calf or something, it squeezes that vein, it shoots blood up past the valve closes, and then the blood sits on that next level, and it slowly works its way back up to the heart. Well, you notice if you've ever taken a long plane ride or sat or stood for a long time that your ankles start swelling. What happens is that blood goes in your legs, and if there's nothing, gravity's pulling it down, there's nothing to get it back to your heart, and that after a while, your blood doesn't like to have stagnant fluid. That causes blood clots, the blood coagulates, causes DVTs, and things, deep venous thrombosis. And so your body says, I don't want that blood and fluid sitting in my legs, and so any chance I get, I'm going to pull that water out of the blood and into the extracellular space under the skin. So what you want to do is you want to lay, and you see this a lot backstage, with people laying on the ground with their feet up on a chair. What it does is their feet are above their heart, and so no gravity's working with you, and it's pulling the water back out from your legs back in your heart. And you really should. I know a lot of people get kind of that nervous, anxious energy backstage when they walk around and pace and stand around. And that's really the worst thing you can do. You want to try to relax and lay with your feet up as much as possible.
So you want to pump up on your back with your feet.
And if you've spilled over, do it for a long time. Do an entire leg work.
With your feet in the air.
Yeah. In the dying cockroach pose. While you're drinking tonic water.
Nailed it.